Good evening, members, and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee for Leader Finance Performance, which is going out via a remote video link on Wednesday, the 15th of September, 2021 at 1800 hours. First of all is the roll call and virtual meeting explanation. And I would like to welcome members of the Democratic Services, Legal Services and Management team and various cabinet members I see here as well. So I'm going to conduct a roll call. Just bear with me a sec. There are various substitutes tonight, so okay. Councillor Alison Bennett.
Present.
Good. Councillor Heidi Brunson.
Present.
Councillor Ellis, who is a sub tonight.
Present.
Thank you.
Present.
Councillor Anne Eves.
Present.
Thanks. Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Henwood.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hicks.
Present.
Councillor Jackson.
Present.
Councillor Knight, I'm here. Councillor Lee.
Present.
Councillor Peacock, who's acting as a sub.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, Sam Smith, who's acting as a sub.
Present.
Councillor Lynn Stockwell.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Webb, who's also acting as a sub. Councillor Webb.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Whitaker.
Present.
Thank you ever so much, everybody. Tonight, the normal Vice Chairman is not able to come, so I would like to propose that Councillor Rex Williams be the Vice Chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Smith, I see seconds that. Thank you. Is that agreed? Just agreed. Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 2, to note any substitutes within Council for Procedure 4. So we've got Councillor Webb for Councillor Paul, for Councillor Peacock, for Councillor Trumbull, Councillor Smith for Councillor Cromie. There's one other, just bear with me. Have I said them all? Councillor Ellis, I beg you, for Sandy Ellis for Councillor Cromie. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, and Councillor Sam Smith. Thank you very much for sub. Apologies for absence. Well, we have Councillor Hawford, Councillor Trumbull, Councillor Cromie, and Councillor Coote. Thank you. Item 4, declare declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. Do I have any? Please raise your hand. I see none. Thank you very much. Item 5, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of May. If you'd use your yes or no buttons, please. The green or the red, if you're in agreement with those minutes. Okay, they're all in favour. Thank you very much. Item 6, to consider any items the Chairman agrees to take as urgent business. I have none. And right to item 7, performance monitoring for the first quarter of 2021-22. This report will be introduced by Mr. Neil Barton. Neil.
Thanks, Chairman. So this is the first quarter performance report for 2021-22. It covers the period 1st of April to the end of June. Performance has been good overall, with 71% of indicators showing at green on our traffic light system, meaning they're on or above the target. So it's a normal format report with a covering report and an appendix, which lists the performance indicators that the committee monitors. One change from the previous reports you've had is that we don't have any council priority projects currently in our corporate plan. So this report only updates on performance information and not on progress with the council priority projects. So one of the things that I'd like to emphasise is that good performance is in the background of the continuing implications of the pandemic for the council. You'll be aware that there was a lifting of some of the restrictions on the 19th of July, but because this report covers the period to the end of June, the COVID has continues to have a significant impact on the council and its performance. So I've highlighted in the report some of the areas of the council where we've taken on some more responsibilities because of the pandemic. These include environmental health in doing food business inspections to make sure they're COVID compliant. Also, our housing service is housing more people in temporary accommodation, including homeless people. And finally, revenues and benefits. They've been paying out new grants to support businesses and also to support individuals through exceptional hardship grants. I'd also like to highlight some of the services that are being affected by the state of the property market. You'll see that our land charges section has dealt with almost double the number of search requests in this quarter compared to the same time last year. This is down to the property market and also the stamp duty holiday. And also we've had more planning applications and activity for our building control services over the last quarter. So hopefully in the report where we're not on target, we've tried to indicate the reasons for this and what we're trying to do to rectify performance. So I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you very much for that. A big thanks to Councillor Annie, who tabled some questions prior to the meeting. I hope you've had an opportunity to read the answers that came out from various officers' team. But I think what we'll do is, if Councillor Annie, do you want to come back? I hope you've seen the answers, have you? Do you want to come back on any of those points?
Yes, Chair, there's only one really. Thank you very much. That was really useful and very quick to get me all the answers. Coming back on charging points, page 20, electric vehicle charging points. I'm wondering really whether we should change the KPI, and would that be possible? Because what it says at the moment is how many people have actually used the charging point. Wouldn't it be more useful if the KPI was the number of days each charging point is available? So that's a suggestion. And I think really the target, instead of lowering the target from 34 to 23, we need the target to go up, not down, because we're in the bottom quartile of councils nationally over charging points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Annie. I just think perhaps the KPI is useful though, in terms of the usage. I think that's probably more valid than the days it's available. One would expect it to be available every day. I don't know how you monitor that. But Neil, would you like to comment on that, please?
I'd like to invite Emma Sheridan to answer that question, because she leads on the sustainability and the electric vehicle charging points.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there will be an opportunity to review the KPIs that we use for EV charging as a result of the new contract, which has just recently been awarded across all the districts and boroughs in partnership with the County Council. There are a suite of KPIs that form part of that contract, and we will be able to report those on a regular basis to this committee. That will include items such as operational uptime, turnaround in terms of fixing issues, but also usage of those as well as bringing forward a programme of implementation of those EV charging points, the first 26 of which are due to be installed before the end of this financial year.
Thanks, Emma. I think they would be very much of interest to members. So if we can look at publishing when they're available. Thank you. Well, Councillor Annie, was well another question? Was it I missed? Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor, you've got your answers. Thank you very much. Okay. Has anybody else got any questions that relating to to the questions that Annie's posed. Councillor Stockwell. In Stockwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. That wasn't actually, my question wasn't about the questions that Councillor Eaves posed, but before we got on to the body of the KPIs, I just had a question for Neil Barton, if I may, on item 7 on page 8, where they're looking at the traffic light system, where there's I fully understand the reason behind it, where something falls into, say, a red or an amber, or I think it's probably the amber one, where it will be shown as a green if the difference is minimal. What I want to know is who decides that, and can we have something within the comments to say that it has, you don't feel that one is in amber really because of whatever reason it is, because otherwise that could get that any issues that are in there could slip and we wouldn't notice them. That's my query on that. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Neil?
Yeah, so the way that the traffic light system has been amended, it still only shows indicators at green if they're on or above target.
Yeah.
So when we did our service plans for this year, we asked our business unit leaders to, in their service planning target setting, to give an indication of how much their PI would have to be off target for it to be considered not able to be rectified by the year end. So the whole point of it is, rather than going from a 10% threshold to be red, we're trying to give you an indication of where there's real concerns about performance. So the indicators would only normally come as red if we feel that the original target is not achievable, or that we need to take major action to try and rectify the performance indicator. So hopefully for all of the indicators that are either amber or red, we do try to put information in the report to put the reasons for that. So hopefully that will provide some reassurance to members.
Thank you.
Councillor Gibson, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've got a point on the electric vehicle charging, if you wanted me to do that first, and I've got some other points.
Please,
My point on the electric vehicle charging is that the figure of 9,000 kilometre hours, and it usefully relates back to the idea of what a KPI might be. Typical charge on an electric vehicle is something like 30 to 40 kilowatt hours. So if we've only done out 9,000 in a quarter, that's somewhere, I don't know, 300 or 600 vehicles, which comes down to somewhere between 4 and 8 a day. It might be interesting to look at just how many vehicles are using these charging points, and also get some idea about the average charge that they take off it, really to feed back into the general information about what we need to be providing in the way of these charging points.
Emma, did you want to comment on that?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Again, that is information that will be able to be gathered through the suite of new contract indicators with the new contract. So that's certainly something that can be considered moving forward. Yes.
On the point that was raised by Councillor Stockwell on the way in which we compare the target and the value, I noticed that there's a number of the measures which have lost the target, and as a result of that, they don't show red. I find it particularly helpful to scan down the red ones. Let me see if I can find one. Yeah, I can find one here, which is quite an interesting one. On page 22, housing, number of households in nightly paid temporary accommodation. I went back and I looked at where we were 2 years ago, just to try and understand a bit better about what the impact of the pandemic's been. 2 years ago, we had a target of 17, and we had a number of households in nightly paid accommodation of 39. So it was glowing red at that point and stood out. We seem to have lost the target, but I noticed we've now got 45. So really that should be drawn to our attention as things getting worse. Now, I understand it's part of the pandemic, but I would make a plea that we try and put something in there to highlight the status. It looks like it's an automatic thing that comes up as to whether it's green, amber or red. But that is just an observation that I would normally glance down the reds. Shall I go on to the other points that I've got, Chairman?
Please do, yeah, Lee. Thank you.
I found it very interesting to go back to this meeting 2 years ago. I started that when I looked at the footfall on page 19. We've got a figure for the footfall in the leisure centres. I love these, sort of 6 significant figures, 172,684. So I looked back and it was 452,392. So we're on a third, a little bit better than a third of where we were. So that really stands out as sort of the level at which we've got back to and the rate at which we are seeing the recovery. However, there's 1 or 2 things that I'm disappointed with. If I go to let me just find it. I didn't mark these things, but I'm going backwards and forwards through it. The waste collection. If you go to page 20, I think we can be a bit disappointed in that in 2019, the amount of waste per household which is disposed of in landfill in kilos was 101. It's now 112, so we've gone backwards by 10%, which is very disappointing indeed. So I would, of course, we are poor relative to West Sussex overall on that percentage of household waste recycling. So that's a point. I think I'll stop there, Mr. Chairman. I think I've taken up the meeting's time enough, but it was an interesting exercise to go back. Now, there was one other point I did want to make on compliments. I attended the Play Day event, and there must have been something like 60 compliments just on the field, which of course aren't recorded in the system. Those have been immensely valuable events and really put the council in a good light. So congratulations to everyone who was involved in that. Thank you.
Mr. Martin Neal, would you make any comments, particularly perhaps on the waste issue?
I was more going to comment generally on the that we've had a process whereby we reviewed the indicators that we thought with the pandemic weren't appropriate to have targets anymore. So for the one of the examples was the leisure centre numbers of visitors. Obviously, the government forced us to close down the leisure centres. So it's been very difficult to set a target for that. So it's been agreed that we don't have a target for that over this year. The same with the housing indicators, because the government has instructed us to house people like rough sleepers. It's been very difficult for us to set targets for housing in terms of homelessness acceptances and people in temporary accommodation. So that's why some of those indicators have been changed to data only indicators without a target. So that's all I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Mr. Anderson, Rob, would you like to comment on the waste issue that Councillor Gibson raised?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy to do that. So on the waste issue is actually, again, an interesting consequence of the pandemic, because what we've seen over the last 18 months, obviously, is a lot more people working from home. And so what would historically have been disposed of as commercial waste through their offices or their place of work is now being disposed of as domestic waste through the residual waste stream. So that is a trend, a national trend that we have seen as a direct consequence of the pandemic. To compare Mid Sussex's performance with West Sussex overall, again, it creates an interesting dynamic, because when you're looking at West Sussex overall, you're looking at all of the waste collection authorities as well as the county council's waste and recycling centres. And the waste and recycling centres have a significantly higher rate of recycling than our curbside service collection. So it slightly skews the results when you look at the county-wide picture and shows a more positive picture overall. Does that make sense?
Did you want to come back, Councillor Gibson?
And I was really comparing it with the figures for districts, but let's not go into the detail of it. The important thing is that we, a suggestion that we really must drive those figures, obviously, to higher levels. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alison Bennett, please.
Chairman, did you just call me because your voice cut out?
Yes, I did.
Okay,
yeah.
good. I heard Councillor at, and then I think that's me, but I'm not too sure. Good, thank you. A couple of points to pick up on as a result of contributions from other members. Mr. Barton, I missed why priority projects aren't in the report. So would you be able to explain that for me, please?
Yes, when we do our corporate plan each year, over the past couple of years, there's been, they used to be called flagship projects and they became council priority projects. So they were identified in the corporate plan, and as well as providing you with performance information, we provided you with a quarterly update on progress of the council priority projects. But there aren't council priority projects, the new ones, in the corporate plan. So some of those council priority projects that we had previously, some of those are ongoing projects. So members will still be updated on progress with those for the normal way through scrutiny and reports to Cabinet and MIS. For example, one of the council priority projects was the Sustainability Action Plan. So we now have a subgroup of this scrutiny committee that's working on the sustainable economy strategy, and you'll receive a draft report on that to agree later in the year. So most of those ongoing council priority projects will still be reported to members, but in a different way.
Okay, so it doesn't form part of the regular reporting to this committee now?
No, because we don't have any current council priority projects to report on.
Because they've been renamed as something else. Is that the correct understanding?
There weren't any identified in the current corporate plan.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, moving on. Picking up on what Councillor Gibson just said about comparing where we are now with 2 years ago. I mean, for me, this speaks to a need to look at long-term trend rather than snapshots on a quarterly basis. So on something like temporary accommodation numbers, the only way we'll see whether, what is normal and what is, say, abnormal and caused by the pandemic is that sort of bar chart showing how it's varied over 5 years or so. We may never get to a point where we return to pre-pandemic normal, but I do think on a number of measures in the report, looking at trend rather than where something sits compared to a red, amber, green status might be more informative. I think that probably applies to Councillor Gibson's point about waste going to landfill as well. That trend, I think, would be helpful. I don't know whether that data is available, but certainly, in a professional roles I've held in the past, that's what we've looked at. And then, Chairman, you asked us to come in on any of Councillor Eaves's points. I did want to talk a little bit about the littering point that Councillor Eaves made, primarily because last night in our ward there were 2 parish council meetings. I went to one, Councillor Jackson went to another, and all year the parishes have been raising concerns about littering and about fly tipping. So one question I was wondering I could ask is, in terms of the written response that Councillor Eaves had about prescribed standards for street cleaning, are there prescribed standards for the rural parts of the district? And are they the same as the standards we'd expect to see in towns? My feeling from members of parish councils is that maybe that they're not seeing any evidence of litter picking. And I've got another question about fly tipping, but I've asked a couple of things, so maybe I'll pause for a second and seek a response on those questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Alison Bennett. Mr. Anderton, would you like to respond to on fly tipping, etc., please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The litter standards that we measure are the national the national benchmark, which is prescribed by Keep Britain Tidy. So we use a cross section, a tranche of different types of road, so rural, urban, built up, commercial, industrial, etc. And so every 3 months we will carry out an inspection of a cross section of each of those sections of road to assess their compliance with those standards. And the same standard is applied across our town centres and villages and rural areas.
So it's the same standard. Okay, thank you. And what about, well, this isn't a question for Mr. Anderton, but the question about trend over time, is that rather than snapshot views?
I can, we use this system called Pentana, which produces the data for the reports, which is used by quite a few other authorities. So I have seen some reports from other councils where they put long-term trends or short-term trends in terms of like an arrow that shows the direction of travel. So I can look at what's done at some other councils and see if we can integrate that into reports. So I'll do some research and come back on that one.
I think that would be useful. So if you could look at that, Mr. Barton, thank you. But we don't want to end up with analysis paralysis through analysis. So we've got to be careful what measures we take on. So, but thank you.
Understood. Thank you. I've got a final question about fly tipping, if I may, Chairman.
Please.
Thank you. So as mentioned, the most common issue I'm picking up from residents and parish councils is about fly tipping. But I note in the performance report there's no indication of where we're at with fly tipping. And I wonder whether that's something that we should seek to include in terms of numbers of fly tips, time to clear fly tips from the point of reporting them, and possibly, a further enforcement action that might get taken. But that seems like a sort of something that I think residents would appreciate us keeping tabs on.
Mr. Anderton, would you like to comment on that, please?
Yes, absolutely, Chairman. We do proactively measure our performance in respect to fly tipping, both in terms of numbers of fly tips, which is something that we're statutorily required to provide returns to government on anyway, but also in terms of the speed with which we clear them. Not currently measuring enforcement action because we haven't historically taken enforcement action. However, that's something we're currently looking at taking forward. So it's something that we do measure, and it's something that has previously been in these reports, but at some point in the recent past, it was removed alongside some other indicators as part of the sort of annual review of what we're reporting to Scrutiny. I'm sure, I'm not sure of the governance around that, but I understand that there is an opportunity on an annual basis to look at what indicators you're seeing, and that's something that we can certainly support with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. Next up is Councillor Brunson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to pick up on the point about the KPIs for electric charging points. And if we are going to have an exploration of the most relevant, can we be careful that we consider that we should be delineating between key result indicators and key performance indicators? Because one optimises the effectiveness of public charging infrastructure and the view in which it's understood by our public, and the other provides us suggestions and ways in which our interventions and policy could take to increase the performance of these. And I think there's also the other matter that in providing sufficient charging points, we have to also consider that one of the things we have to take evaluation of is if increasing charging infrastructure is at the expense of parking spaces, which are, actually going to be well used if our facilities and our infrastructure isn't. So I know it's a complex context under which we understand what we want to do in terms of our intervention. But I think there's a bigger debate around what indicators we actually want to see and for what reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bunsen, for those comments. Councillor Sandy Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask a question, because I'm just subbing here this evening. Obviously, I've read the agenda and I've read it previously. But under item 12, it says where performance is below target, corrective actions for improvements have been planned and will be sort of delivered. Do we actually ever get an update on what was planned, what was delivered, and how they sort of overcome the status on those? Because I can see with all the warning lights, obviously, I've read all of those and I can see why they've happened. And I think you've done a wonderful job to adapt and change through COVID-19 and extra responsibilities. But it was just, if there's ever a report that feeds back on that, and just on the waste services, I'm sure you've probably covered this with Councillor Eaves, but with the street cleaning at 72.2%, has the fact that volunteers couldn't go out en masse to do their volunteering litter picking and everything, which they make a very much big difference to town village, would that have had an impact on street cleaning as well? Thank you.
Neil, do you want to take the first point about the reporting back?
Yes, in terms of the reporting back, as I said, we do try and indicate in the report what action we're trying to take. And by virtue of the fact that we update every quarter and also provide an end of year report, that in effect does give you a progress report on where we are with trying to implement our improvement plans.
Thank you. And Mr. Andrew, Rob, would you want to comment on the street cleaning, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As per the response to Councillor Eaves, street cleansing satisfaction rates for the reasons explained are consistently lower than the satisfaction rates we get for refuse and recycling anyway, and that is not something that's unique to the last period or even the last couple of periods, but actually consistently over a number of years. However, there's every possibility that that certainly the last couple of surveys where the rate is in the low 70s may well have been partly as a consequence of the fact that there isn't so much community activity out and about litter picking. May well also have been down to the fact that lots more people were staying local, using their local parks and local facilities rather than leaving the district. So there are a variety of potentially underlying causes there that could be related to the pandemic.
Thank you.
Councillor Hicks.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. On the waste recycling, in terms of the rate, I should just note that given the increase in green bin recycling, which has increased by 11% over the last 2 years, that is even further cause perhaps for concern that the pandemic has led to an increase in recycling or a reduction in the recycling rate, when an increased proportion is actually going to green waste. So it'd be interesting to review the net figure and see what impact that green recycling rate has. In terms of the fly tipping and littering that was mentioned, I'm concerned that we aren't able to enforce fixed penalty notices at the moment. I know Rob has given me a commitment that will be remedied but for November, but I think perhaps it would be useful just to commit to that in this meeting, that we will have an enforcement capability for fly tipping and indeed other environmental fixed penalty notices. I'd also like to highlight on the number of relating to the customer satisfaction, and I see it's been updated. I note that that's relating to incoming phone calls, but I just wonder, given it is being amended, whether we can include the online inquiries, noting particularly in terms of the number of e-forms submitted has increased substantially, but there's no customer satisfaction measure for that. And thinking also in terms of where email, is that included in one of these stats, or is that not measured at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Simon Hughes, would you like to take the question about the online inquiries, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We do actually have data that sits beneath this, which is our customer service for each of the measures or each of the channels that we have. So that includes not just email, that includes things like particular channels through the internet, pages that people view, pages that people have transactions on. So we measure those and assess those. And in fact, one of the parts of work that we're planning for next year in the service planning is looking at that data so that we can revise the internet, revise the design of it to improve people's transactions, but also to ensure we supply the information they need in the easiest way. So the answer to the question is yes, we do record customer data across all those measures in quite a lot of detail. We also have that helps inform an approach called personas. So we develop personas, that's typical people that you visit our sites. So we can identify who we're missing and therefore other channels that we need to provide information along, be that broadcast media or in our own monthly information that we send out to people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. Councillor Judy Llewellyn-Burke, you are here. I wonder if you wanted to comment on the fly tipping. I don't think Councillor Balsey's here, but you got any comments? It's been raised several times, various issues with not being able to issue fixed penalties, etc. Is that something you might want to consider at Cabinet?
As you know, thank you, Chairman. As you know, Councillor Balsey is the portfolio holder, so that would be something that would be directed during his scrutiny meeting. However, we did since I've been a councillor in 2017, we did have a successful prosecution, fly tipping prosecution. So it has happened, and I know that within the villages and rural areas it is particularly difficult to identify and catch people in the act and identify it, and it can be quite intimidating. So I'm well aware, as it happens in my ward, that the difficulties in proving it, but it is something that will be taken up with Councillor Balsey, and it, as Mr. Anderson said, it is being addressed. It's just that we could spend thousands and thousands of pounds of taxpayers' money and not have a successful prosecution. So we just really need to encourage people to report them, and also indicate if they happen to get close enough, if there is any proof of the number plates and the person who actually does the fly tipping. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw a programme on it the other day on the TV. It is extremely complicated to try and catch people. It was a very interesting program.
Sorry, Chairman, can I come back on that and just highlight? I think there is an issue in terms of staffing, in terms of the evidence available to pursue fly tipping, because I provided 2 addresses that related to a fly tipping incident, and I understand that they're not able to be taken up at the moment. And I realise that there's a substantial body of evidence required even for fly tipping, but in terms of if we're not able at the moment due to staffing to take forward potential leads and at least highlight to those who are involved in the fly tipping that some action is being reviewed. I think maybe there's a need for additional staffing, not just in terms of a fixed penalty notice scheme to be introduced.
Thank you for comments, and I'll ask the officer team and the cabinet members to go away and have perhaps a further look at that, what more can be done. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Gibson, you're next, please.
Yes, thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. It was just to clarify the point on the footfall in the leisure centres. In the same way that Gatwick is looking at its 2019 figure of 46 million passengers, I thought it was a good measure of the state of the recovery. So I wasn't looking for any really time history either way. I was just looking to ensure that we did not forget that currently we're at about a third of where we were. And ironically, that seems to be about where Gatwick is at the moment. So it was in that context that I went back and looked at 2 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Stockwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question for you initially. We have in previous meetings gone through these performance indicators by portfolio, and I wondered if we were going to do that again this evening on the basis I don't want to miss any points that I want to raise. I just wondered how the meeting was going to.
Thank you for that. I did think about should we go that line, but because we had these advanced questions, I thought we'd take them first and we'll go down that line. But perhaps you're right. Perhaps next time I will go back to portfolio. But I'll give an opportunity at the end for anybody who's missed any questions. So, fair point, fair comment.
May I ask my questions now, then, please?
I'll come to you in a minute. Okay.
All right. Thank you,
Councillor Whitaker.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was on similar vein, really. I wasn't quite sure if we were just going generally or a specific thing. So I've got some points, not necessarily questions, but I'll wait my turn. Thank you.
Councillor Peacock.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's first time I've been on this committee, so I think it's a quick question. Building control, obviously noting the resource issues we had and the increase in applications. Was there a noticeable increase in non-compliance? Do we know? Just out of interest, thanks.
Mr. Clark, would you like to take that question?
No, Councillor Peacock. The building control world seemed to carry on through the pandemic as it had done previously. There are quite a lot of people having extensions, so it's not been a bad period for building control.
Thank you.
Okay, as we've started on building control, has anybody got any more questions relating to building control? I see none. Any relating to community services, policy and performance? Councillor Stockwell. You're on mute.
Building control. Oh yeah, that was a question on building control was on the first item about the percentage of plans received, which are checked within 15 working days. This is on a red, and I can understand one of the reasons why, but also you very often when you give us updates, you say whether you expect to be back into the green by year end. Can you confirm that is the case, so that we're actually going to be able to catch up on it? Because you've obviously had an awful lot of plans come in this year, or in the first quarter. Thank you.
As Councillor Stockwell, as the comment says, it was an unfortunate period when there were a lot of plans coming in and staff were taking leave. So that's what caused the issue there. We're hoping that won't be repeated throughout the year. No knowledge of that at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockwell. Community services, environmental health, land charges, legal and member services, community services, environmental health, land charges, legal and member services, customer services and communications, human resources, ICT and digital, revenue and benefits, finance. Sorry, Councillor Whittaker. Which subject was it, Councillor? I know I was going through.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Revs and Bens. Just a comment really to say, I think in the overall reports of all of these statistics, very easy to forget what we've just come through with the COVID sort of 18 months. These stats are for April to June, and that's coming out of lockdown for the kind of the second time. So very awkward situation, lots of backlog, lots of adjustment, lots of government advice falling away and adjusting to it. So I think, you know, the overall report being very good, I'd like to, you know, thank all of the staff for constant adjustment and then adjusting back to brackets, so-called normal life, close brackets. But particularly on page 16, 17, the about 9,000 sort of claims processed in the period for adjustments to either council tax or various other revs and bends, and that's sort of 150 a day or on average over the quarter, which I think is remarkable. We know about the business support grants, but £49 million, over 7,000 claims processed. Fantastic, you know, to keep support to businesses. I think that's important. So I just want to thank, you know, all of the staff involved for a great effort again.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Thank you very much for those comments. On to finance, property and asset maintenance, economic development, parking services, environment and service delivery, and leisure operations. Councillor Stockwell.
Thank you, Chairman. You have to be quick to get in on this lot, don't you? It was just on the going back on the leisure centres. Now, they have been operating in a reduced capacity, and obviously that has meant that the numbers within Q1 are reduced to what we would normally expect to see. Are they still working at reduced capacity, or have the restrictions been eased so they can now accommodate more people in there? Do we know?
Mr. Barton, have you got? Oh, Rob Anton, Mr. Anton, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just looking at those figures from Q1, it needs to be remembered that they are absolutely in the thick of lockdown still. They relate to April, May, June. So as things were being eased, but certainly not back to how we would expect them to be. Should everything be running as normal. We are now in a position where the majority of our activities are back on offer, and are back on offer much nearer to capacity than they have historically been. There are, however, still some bits and pieces, particularly around some of the indoor classes, where capacity is still limited due to social distancing. But it's a constant review process with Places Leisure, who obviously are in touch with all the industry experts, industry bodies, in terms of seeking guidance and making sure that they're complying with best practice. So we're edging ever closer to normality and how things used to be, but we're not quite there yet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And really the area I've covered, if anyone has got, is housing in the planning portfolio. Anybody, any comments, any questions? Okay, thank you. The recommendations are on page 7. And the points I picked up on tonight, the major points I picked up from members, is certainly KPIs relating to the charging points, perhaps a more trending analysis for some of the key measures, and certainly the fly tipping, perhaps officers and cabinet want to have a deeper look at that. So there's Councillor Stockwell, is it a new point, please? Or was you just...
Yes, it is, Chairman. I was waiting for you to get to development management, and it didn't happen.
Please.
And my question is around the planning enforcement, which is all on green, etc. But is there a possibility that we could have some sort of measurement, a percentage perhaps, of the successful rate of the planning enforcement notices? Because I hear all sorts of different things coming in from residents about what's happening, and it seems to take a long time to sort anything out. So I want, and I don't know what the full process is. I will admit my ignorance here, but is there a way that we can see how successful we are in bringing, what should we say, recalcitrant developers back on track? What have we got? What can we see that will show that we're actually doing what we say we're going to do within the permissions given and the conditions put into the authorised planning applications? Thank you.
Tom?
I think that would take some thought, Chairman. Obviously, you don't go straight to an enforcement notice. You try and negotiate and get the thing complied with. It's a little difficult to say what's successful, what's not, because sometimes you get more success with the conversation than you do with the notice. But we could certainly give figures about the number of notices issued and how many then resulted in prosecutions, because that's the outcome. If they don't comply with the notice, you end up in a prosecution. But normally there is sufficient compliance that you don't need to go that far.
Is that something we could look to do for a year-end report?
Probably, Chairman, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Alison-Bennett.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I was just listening to your wrapping up comments, and in terms of recommendations and points that you've noted, I don't understand what sort of how the governance procedure works on this, but if I note that recommendation 3(2) is to advise the Cabinet of any issues that the committee considers should be given particular consideration. Is there a way we as a committee can suggest that another scrutiny committee kind of puts a subject on its work plan? So I'm thinking specifically that maybe fly tipping should be looked at and littering should be looked at broadly by the scrutiny committee for communities, customer service and service delivery. But I'm sure Mr. Clark's going to tell me that that's not how things work.
Mr. Clark. You're on mute.
Yeah, it's up to the other committees what they do, but the idea generally is that that could go into the minutes, and the minutes can be drawn to their attention in the same way as the points made tonight will be drawn to the Cabinet's attention, although the Cabinet members, of course, are here listening to the debate.
Yeah, I just wondered whether that would be a sort of something worth suggesting in our notes.
You can suggest it, but what you can't do is direct it.
Okay, fine.
Okay, I see no more people wishing to speak. So the recommendations on page 7. Note the Council's performance in the first quarter of the year and identify any areas where further reporting or information is required. We've discussed that. Advise the Cabinet of any issues the committee considers give particular consideration at their Cabinet meeting on the 18th of October 2021. Please use your buttons if you agree. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving along to item 8, Scrutiny Committee for Leader Performance and Performance Work Programme 2021-22. Mr. Clark.
Yes, Chairman, you have the standard items there, but there is another item that will come back to your committee, and that's the work being done by the working group on sustainability and economic strategy. So it may well be you have at your agreement, we have a special meeting for that if it doesn't fit in with the current schedule of meetings. And once it's come back to your committee, of course, it will need to be considered by council for adoption.
But there is no date for that set yet, Tom.
Not at the moment, Chairman. Probably later this year. So December or possibly January.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions? I don't see any indications. So the committee is recommended to agree the indicative work programme as set out in the paragraph 5 of this report. Use your yes or no buttons, please. That's 14 in favour, 1 member hasn't voted. Thank you. Item 9, question pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2. Due notice being given, there is none. Therefore, I close the meeting at 18:56. Thank you all ever so much. Just remain seated till we close the meeting.